Podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, Ian Rivers, my co-host, and Ian, our second podcast of the week, our second consecutive week of having two episodes crammed into a 7-day span. And that is because we're talking with Lucas of Beaver Territory. He's making his triumphant return onto the podcast because there is a big series coming up this weekend. Hey, Lucas, thanks for taking the time to hop on with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's, really exciting time of year right now, and I'm all for talking about, Bemidji State hockey here as we move towards the end of the regular season and into the playoffs.
Yeah, I used the phrase cautiously optimistic before the podcast started when describing my feelings towards this weekend. I'm excited, but Lucas, I think you put it best earlier this week when you said, yeah, it could be awesome. And it could really suck because, you have those expectations now on your shoulders of we have the 4-point lead. The pressure is kind of on us on home ice to take at least 2 points and wrap up the MacNaughton Cup. And we can talk a little bit more about that later on. But I think that the Beavers are in a pretty good spot to do it. And we can kind of go into why in a little bit. But I want to start talking about how we kind of got here. Especially last weekend's series with St. Thomas, which was a really enjoyable series. I mean, there was parts of Friday that were frustrating, obviously, but overall, that was a very exciting game. If you take out the external factors, I think that a lot of people who are Beaver fans would like to forget about. But a 6-5 game and an overtime winner by Jackson Jutting. 2 points were big in that game. Lucas, you got to watch this one. What did you make of that mess?
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of crazy. I thought Bemidji State was the better team, especially 5-on-5. Obviously, they gave up a couple of power play goals and spent a little bit more time shorthanded than they probably should have throughout that game. But overall, that St. Thomas team is just hurting so much right now. And it's very similar to what Bemidji State was going through kind of at the end of December and into January, where, I think they had everyone possible in the lineup on Friday. They didn't really have any extra skater, and then on Saturday, they ended up only dressing 11 forwards, one of which was a defenseman, one of which was a guy who was actually injured and didn't play at all and was just there to serve bench minors. So, when they lost Mac Byers, I guess he actually did come back into the game on Friday after that hit, but, he was out Saturday and definitely wasn't the same player that he normally is the rest of the game on Friday after he got injured there. So, yeah, I mean, it was a series that you should have gotten the majority of the points from. Friday night was you were fortunate to get that extra point because I thought St. Thomas had some good chances in overtime and they had the momentum after scoring late in that game. Getting that extra point just with everything else going on that night, all the help you're getting around the league, that was just huge.
Yeah, Friday night was huge around the league in terms of, like you said, help, because Friday night saw Michigan Tech 7-0 over Bowling Green. That was a bit of a shock for me to see that. And then Lake Superior State, their 5th ever win, at least at the Division I level. I don't know if they ever met before this. 4-3 over Minnesota State in Mankato. So that was a huge upset in terms of just the severity of that series for Minnesota State. And like you said, the Beavers, I mean, I've tried to get away as I've gotten older from being the guy who just every loss is on the refs, right? Oh yeah, I mean, the refs were against us. Nah, it's not always like that straightforward, but I truly did think that on Friday night, it was pretty abysmal. The Beavers only had one penalty called for them, and it was also an embellishment by Adam Fleming. I think it was Fleming who went down on that play. And I will still say I don't understand quite 100% how you can call both the hook and the embellishment. I understand it, but if he hadn't gone down, would you have still called the hook? It seems like probably maybe I'm out of touch with that, but it seems a little bit silly. But
yeah, and we didn't really get a good replay on that either. I couldn't actually tell what happened on that play. Like you see the stick across Fleming's midsection and he goes down, but there's the camera there. You couldn't actually like it didn't go to the camera until he was already on his way to the ice. So so yeah, you get that one penalty called against St. Thomas, and then on the ensuing faceoff, you get a delay of game for the, covering the puck with the hands. So you end up actually going down on a 4-on-3 power play right off of that too. So, you didn't get any advantage out of that. Usually 4-on-4, this team's pretty good, and I would have liked to see just that team out there 4-on-4. I think they could have, gotten some momentum from that. Instead, they go on the penalty kill. I think they killed it off, but it definitely kind of shifted things towards the end of the first.
Yeah. And I guess the other bigger call, or no call, if you want to say, was the too many men that was missed against St. Thomas towards the end of the game. And I don't really care as much about that one, because with or without that call, BSU had plenty of chances to hit the empty net. I think it was Flamang that missed one. It was Jopi for sure missed the empty net once. And then, of course, Matthias Scholl had a silly little play where he tried to come out of his own net to, in it. I think we discussed this after the game was over. It wasn't necessarily Scholl's fault for trying to make that play. It was just pretty poor execution in terms of actually getting the puck out of the zone or hitting the net with it if he was actually going for that.
Yeah, to me, I mean, you have that puck rolling in on you. Your defensemen aren't set up yet. You're not going to, play the puck off to the side or behind the net, because you're just going to invite pressure on yourself. So, in that split second, you're kind of thinking in your head, you have, you can either cover up the puck and get an offensive zone faceoff for the other team, or you can go for the empty net. If you miss it, it's icing. You get an offensive zone faceoff, or you win the game with an empty netter. You don't really have the idea of just fanning on that and only getting it about chest high at the blue line. Like, just wasn't the St. Thomas player made that look a lot harder than it was. I think so. I don't think he needed to jump to glove that down.
Yeah, I thought that he actually made a great play, because he jumped and it looked like he just picked it out of the air. But then, upon further rewatch, it just kind of hit him in the chest.
There's another player that's coming up on Scholl with his stick up in the air, like trying to bat it down, and it's like 3 feet below the top of his stick. Like, he didn't need to reach his stick up at all. I was going back and looking, I'm like, I wonder if he actually like made contact and tipped it down, but no, it just stayed low and never really had a chance of getting out of the zone.
Great. Just great. The only other thing I wanted to touch on in terms of the penalties from this weekend is that it looked to me, now maybe I just don't pay attention as much in other games, but it looked to me like Rico Blasi knew he was going to be shorthanded coming into this weekend. After every time that Scholl froze the puck, it looked like the Tommies had come in and just tried to instigate a little bit with BSU, hoping that they could get maybe one of those retaliation penalties, because they figured, we're shorthanded. The more time we can spend with an extra man on the ice is better for us. And to their credit, it worked on Friday night for their best. Did you kind of notice that, or was it more of what you see in every other series and I'm just making something out of nothing?
I guess I didn't really notice anything too abnormal there. It's odd to do it this late in the season with this much on the line. Typically, you're not going to risk taking a penalty like that, or trying to cause havoc like that. St. Thomas, I think as a team, they play with a bit more of an edge though, and they have some guys there that are bigger physical guys that'll play like that. So it's not a huge surprise if that was the case, but I think overall Bemidji State did a pretty good job of not responding to those antics, and they haven't really had too many situations this year where they have. I know Polkamp has gotten a couple of slashing penalties, hitting guys across the wrist and things like that. But, I think even he has kind of calmed that down a little bit as we get closer to the playoffs and there's a lot more on the line.
So, as we look into the weekend as a whole, the Bemidji State is able to come within, and they're 1 point away from clinching that MacNaughton Cup. And, it's been a while since Bemidji State has been even in a position in the final weekend of the season. We talked about it on the last show where Ian was up in Bemidji in 2020, right before the world went sideways. But before that, when Bemidji State actually had a chance and took advantage of it and won the MacNaughton Cup. It was back in 2017. I guess, Lucas, just what are the chances? What do you think coming into this weekend? They only need 1 point, but of course, out of all the teams, it had to be Minnesota State.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're going to become the champions, you got to beat the champions, and you got to beat the team that's won it now 6 years in a row. You know, you do need 2 points. So there's a couple of different avenues to get that. A win of any kind, regulation, overtime win, that'll be enough. If you lose both games in overtime, I'll take it. Like, that'll be enough to get the title too. So, yeah, it's, you know, the schedule makers did a really good job, you know, considering how much hype was around Michigan Tech and Northern Michigan entering the season, you know, to get this last weekend and get this rivalry scheduled and then have it come down to these two teams. It's just perfect. It's just going to be so much fun up there. I can't wait.
Are you planning on being up there at all? Or are you going to watch from your house?
I'll be up there on Friday and Saturday. Yep.
Okay. All right. So you and Ian are going to are you guys going to be like up on the glass pounding on the boards, or what's the plan?
I told my girlfriend I might get kicked out. Like, if we lose Friday night, like, there's a decent chance that I get arrested, but we'll see. I am on the glass at least one of the nights, so that'll be good.
Perfect. So if they win, you'll also get arrested because they'll have won the MacNaughton Cup. So who cares? Like, let's go run around.
All this talk about, you know, storming the court in basketball. We need to storm the ice. I think that'd be great.
God.
That'd be that. See, nobody storms the ice, even if you let them. So many kids will slip. That's the prevention measure there. But I mean, yeah, it's going to be a fun atmosphere. I think I've been to one series in my college career where I showed up to a game against Mankato, and it always feels like there's a different vibe at the rink. Like, you know, even some of the more casual, like, I'm a student, I just want to go to a hockey game. Even everybody kind of realizes it's Mankato. There's like an extra urgency. You know, the Minnesota State fans travel well. Just what do you guys think the atmosphere is going to be like at the Sanford Center this weekend?
Yeah, I'm hoping it'll be good. You know, unfortunately, college hockey always runs into this situation where spring break starts, you know, the last week of the season or the first week of playoffs. And unfortunately, you know, this is going to be the start of spring break. So I saw the Sanford Center was giving away student tickets this week. So hopefully, you know, the students that are on campus, you know, show up and get out there, and hopefully the community of Bemidji, you know, responds to what this situation is. I mean, it's a great opportunity that we haven't seen a championship celebration on home ice in 14 years. You know, like you were saying, back in 2017, I think they ended up winning it in Huntsville. Yep. And then in 2020, you know, I was at that final weekend game too, or the final game of that season, and so close, and yet so far in the end. You know, that was a really close game going into the third period that Mankato pulled away at, and with then, you know, they were able to lift the cup on our in our rink, and man, that would just suck if that happened again.
Yeah, especially with a little bit different circumstance. That season you came in down 6 points. You needed a sweep, all in regulation, just to time and get a share of it, which would have been a weird situation on its own, which could technically happen this weekend as well. Imagine that Saturday game ending with Mankato getting 3 points, tying Bemidji after an overtime loss, and then both teams, maybe they just combine and take a picture with the cup. But I hopefully that doesn't happen, because maybe Mankato enjoys it, but you know, a tie is like kissing your sister, and you don't want to do that. So let's just get 2 points, and I hope that I too am excited for the atmosphere. I'll be there pretty close, I think, to where Lucas is sitting, if my buddy has his head in the right place. So I'm curious to see how the student section will look. I'm sure that general admission will be pretty good. And I like your comments about spring break, and I think that it goes a long way. Moving the hockey season has been something that's come up recently, not maybe seriously, but in fan conversations. And maybe it's a conversation for another time, but I think that might be a benefit. Push back a couple weeks, avoiding spring break around playoff time, and then maybe moving out of the shadow of March Madness when your own national tournament is going on, and trying to break into more of a fan, a neutral fan perspective, where they're not going to be watching your national televised hockey games when March Madness, the opening weekend, is on the same weekend most of the time. So, but again, that's a conversation for another time. We've got a MacNaughton Cup to focus on, and I do want to backtrack just a little bit because I want to touch on Saturday's game against St. Thomas because it looked a lot better and a lot more clean from a Bemidji State perspective. Lucas, I know you didn't get to watch the game when it happened. Did you go back and watch it at all, or did you just catch the highlights?
I just watched the highlights on it.
Okay. So there was a turning point in that game, and I think the turning point came when the Beavers went up on a power play, and it was an awful power play for the first minute and a half of it. They ended up taking a penalty. It turns into a penalty shot. And I think the turning point of the game really was the decision to take the penalty shot instead of the power play from the Tommies. I thought that was a weird decision. Bemidji State has been horrible on the penalty kill all season. They would have had a minute 45, a little bit less than that on the power play. Instead, they take the penalty shot. Matthias Scholl has only allowed one goal in a penalty situation this year to, I believe, Rylan Mosley of Michigan Tech in the shootout. He shuts him down, and then within like 10 seconds of that happening, Kyle Loaf puts in a goal on the power play for the Beavers, and it's 1-0. And I think that was a huge turning point in that game because the second period is maybe one of the best I've seen all season. And if it wasn't for Jake Seibel in net, the Beavers probably would have been leading 4-0 at the end of the second period. They, I think, led shots 26 or 23-6 in the second period. It was unbelievable. And I was one of the people who saw Seibel on the Richter Award watch list, or the finalists or the semifinalists.
Semifinalists, yeah.
Semifinalists, yeah. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, he's been good, but like he splits every night, or every weekend, I mean, I had an awakening in that second period. I was like, no, I get it now. He's pretty good at stopping the puck.
It's absolutely bizarre that St. Thomas, they don't even really split. Trotter gets the majority of starts there, and it makes zero sense to me watching Seibel play. He's by far their better goaltender. If you're in a semifinal game and you don't start him, that's almost criminal. I don't know why they keep. I mean, I know they want to get Trotter experience and keep them fresh, Seibel fresh, but yeah, they just need to turn the reins over to Seibel at some point this season.
Well, and you think, especially in a situation like this where you're still within 2 points of first place, yeah, you're shorthanded, but that kind of seems like the time to say, hey, you need to go steal a game for us. Like goaltenders can do that, especially come February and March. It's pretty common. So it is a little bit shocking to see that happen. I think that we kind of had similar experiences all through last year when Gavin Enright is still getting splits here and there with Matthias Scholl, frustratingly. So yeah, I think Seibel played out of his mind. But the real stars for me this past weekend and even, a couple weeks in the past year have been the fourth line. And I want to talk about them quick and just give them their flowers because even outside of a point scoring perspective, I think they've just been phenomenal. And especially, you look at what happened Friday night against Ferris State. It was Dante Lawson, Jake McLean, and Reese Chinton, and they had a great game. And Territory rewards them and doesn't go back to the Engstrom and Quinn. He stays with them and gives them both games on Friday, Saturday this last weekend, and they combined for 3 goals, I think, if you include the Vince Corcoran goal with Chinton and McLean assisting on Saturday night. Their hustle has been phenomenal. I think they were one of the first shifts that I saw in that second period where I was just like, yeah, it looks like the Tommies' legs are starting to slow down. BSU's just running all over them. So what's your opinion, Ben, of the fourth line as of late?
As of late, it's been exceptional. I mean, you didn't want to talk about points, but I think Chinton's got 5 now in his last 3 games. Was named CCHA Rookie of the Week, well deserved for that. Probably should have gotten it last week too. They've been exceptional. I mean, they're out there. They're not getting the special team minutes by any means, but out there 5-on-5 in some pretty big moments against some second and first and second lines of the opposing teams, and they're playing well in all zones. I mean, it's not just the offense that they're producing. They provide a spark when they're out there, and they can shift momentum. It's been a really good sight to see, just because you have two freshmen out there, and they're developing and they're playing well. Jake McLean's one of your true centermen on the team, and he's been really, really good in the faceoff dot for a freshman. Yeah, it's awesome. I can't wait to see, I hope they keep, parts of that line together. Obviously Dante's a couple years older, but if you can keep Jake McLean and Reese Chinton together and developing throughout these next 4 years, it's, that Jake's going to be a top line center on this team at some point in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's already putting in good minutes. I think he's got 4 goals on the season now,
Yep.
which isn't spectacular, but for a freshman that hasn't gotten all that much ice time, he's played really well, especially earlier in the season. And now, he had a lull in the middle, and now as of late again, he's really turned it on.
Yeah,
And
if you compare like what this fourth line has done compared to the last couple of years, it's night and day. Like they're so much more productive, and this it's not just the fourth line; it's top to bottom. All 4 lines are
yeah,
producing now, and that's something that you need come playoff time. Leighton Rhodes kind of been on a bit of a drought. He's picking up points here and there, but when you have your second, third, and fourth lines producing, it doesn't matter if the other team can shut them down. You're still getting threats every other shift. So yeah, it's just awesome to see that finally happen, because Bemidji State's been so reliant on their top line for the last 3-4 years. Yeah, they just haven't seen this kind of depth scoring in a while.
yeah, I was going to make a comment about that because earlier in the season, it felt like when Rhodes' line wasn't on the ice, you're like, where is the spark going to come from? Where is the offense going to come from? And now almost any combination of players that's on the ice, you've got guys that are hot. You've got Chiddington, you've got McLean, when you've got Yuri Vaisanen's on a tear lately. Adam Lemang has been really good. So almost every line, Jackson Judding, every line has got players that can put the puck in the back of the net. And the defensemen do it at a pretty good rate too. I think Kyle Loft said he's finding his shot again. Eric Polkamp obviously has been phenomenal offensively, especially this season as a freshman. So like you said, it's been great. And the last time I remember the fourth line sticking out this much to me was probably the last season that they won the MacNaughton Cup. You think of guys like TJ Rue and Mike Soucier.
Yep.
They put some good shifts in that season on the fourth line, and that's kind of what this reminds me of.
Yeah, I thought you brought up a good point about the blue line too. I mean, last year this team was so reliant on Will Zamolik and Elias Rosen. They were both out there close to 30 minutes a game, if not more. And they were really the only 2 defensemen that produced offensively too. And now you have guys like Vince Corcoran, and you have guys like Mitch Wolf, who can both, set up plays or provide a little bit of a spark with their skating ability. Polkamp obviously is having a great freshman year, and then Kyle Loft has just found this offensive magic from nowhere. He's not tote dragging as many guys as he did earlier in the season, but he's still out there skating well. And every game it seems like you see him going behind the net and digging away for pucks, and just it's just fun to see. There's a lot more fluidity with the attack, and that's something that we haven't seen in years past as well.
So now let's flash forward here to this weekend series with Minnesota State. Lucas, what do you know about the Mavs? What's the game plan? If you're a casual fan and you say, hey, when I want to watch this game or hear about this game, what does Minnesota State do this season that has kind of kept them in contention? Because they've had a lot go wrong in the offseason last year, losing their head coach, losing a bunch of recruits. And now as they try and rebuild a little bit here, how does that look for them this season?
Yeah, they don't do anything exceptionally well, but they don't do anything bad. They're, every single statistical category with Minnesota State is kind of in that 15 to 30 range, where they're, by far, they've been, producing or scoring at a higher rate than a lot of teams in the CCHA. They defend well. Their goaltending's been inconsistent as of late. It was a strength for them really early on in the season, and And, I know against Lake Superior State last weekend, both, Tracy definitely struggled. Alex Tracy definitely struggled. Keenan Rancier came in relief on Friday and ended up starting Saturday too, and played well enough, but not great. If you want to identify one player to watch on their team, it's Sam Morton. He's at 22 goals on the season right now, which is 4th in the NCAA. He's their top scorer. He's a fifth-year player. They have a lot of experienced goal scorers with Morton, with Lucas Sauter, with Caden Bolson, Brian Carabas, who scored the game winner against Lake Superior State with under a minute left on Saturday. He's a transfer from Boston, senior transfer. Josh Grohl. I mean, it's a bunch of familiar names that we've seen over the last couple of years, really playing in more depth spots, and now they're getting their opportunity to shine. And a couple of guys that came back from injury too, like Sam Morton tore his ACL last year, and it's just had a phenomenal season for them. You also have Evan Murr, who's kind of their star freshman defenseman, probably the only one out there competing with Eric Polkamp Eric Polkamp and Cole Moore, I would say, and Murr are probably your 3 favorites for CCHA Rookie of the Year. He's at, over 25 points a game. Yeah, 25. I mean, top to down, there's just no really weak spots. They have 4 good lines. They have some good scoring threats throughout the lineup, and it's going to be a challenge. If there's one part of their team right now that I'm not so sure on, it's going to be their goaltending. I think Bemidji State can pop a couple, and if they get out to an early lead, I think that's best case scenario for this team.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good thing if it's goaltending, because Bemidji State, they haven't scored less than 3 goals in a game since Augustana. And it's been 6 straight games now. And even against Augustana, they scored 5 and then they scored 2. So the offense has not been an issue for the Beavers at points like I think we kind of thought it was earlier in the season. So they're hot at the right time. And I think that they can counter Minnesota State pretty well. Like I said, I think that the Beavers, I have a weird confidence in them. I did even going into last weekend, where I'm like, realistically, I don't see how this team does drop more than 3 points. Like, minimum, the Beavers will come away. I don't think they could get swept. And partially that was because of how, injured St. Thomas was. But even against Minnesota State at home, I think if this game is in Mankato, or these games, you're a little bit more nervous just because of what that building has been the last 2 seasons, dating back to the 2022 CCHA championship game. Just out of your mind lucky that they've been the last 2 seasons. But I do think that the Beavers are in a good position to take the bare minimum, which would be 2 points.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much doubt in my mind that this team can do it. I know they're capable of it. I know they're playing the right way right now and playing really good hockey over the last month or 2 months now. There's that doomsday scenario that's always going to sit in the back of your mind just because of who the opponent is and what it means. But, it's going to be a fun weekend no matter what. And I fully expect that Bemidji State will come on top come out on top at least one of the games and be able to raise that banner. So.
Yeah,
I mean,
you watch sports differently. Once you see your favorite football team go up 27-0 in a playoff game, and you silently say to yourself, man, it really sucked to blow this. And then, 2 hours later, you're like, oh my God, what just happened? You do not watch sports the same way after that game. And I'm sure as Minnesota sports fans and everybody from around here understands that too. So go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, I was going to say, you hit it on the head. There's always going to be that apprehension in a sports fan of what's the worst thing that can happen? But also at the end of the day, if that happens, well, then it's just meant to be, I guess. You're just not meant to hold the MacNaughton Cup. But at the same time, it's so much in Bemidji State's lap right now where all they have to do is get, like you said, Lucas, 2 points. And they are in very good position to do just that. The whole conference has been kind of out of whack so far this season. And I mentioned it on the last podcast, that might lend somebody to go, well, it doesn't really matter what seeding you get if anybody can beat anybody, and the conference is very even this year, to which I would say getting that 1 seed might be even more important just to to get that home ice advantage and to make sure that you get somebody who is at the very bottom of the conference in a year where there's not a ton separating everybody.
Yeah, I kind of think like the semifinals and finals, the home ice advantage doesn't matter as much, but the first round it's crucial. Like I believe last year, well, I think Ferris State upset Bowling Green, but other than that, all of the chalk won. Um, and yeah, I mean for Bemidji State and specifically, they've been a much better home team than road team this year. Um, so right now they've clinched home ice in that first round of the playoffs, so that's awesome. But there's also a huge difference between playing Lake Superior State in the first round and playing Ferris State in the first round, and I know who I'd rather have right now.
That's the exact scenario that I brought up earlier this week on our first episode. Was I'd much rather play the team in Ferris State who has not really shown any consistency at any time this year than the team that took 8 points off of you this year in Lake Superior State. Now, obviously, they could finish ahead of Northern Michigan, but even Northern Michigan, I said, with their offensive firepower that they have on any given night, they can take goals off of you. And then, if you lose game one, you got to beat them 2 games straight. So yeah, getting and don't forget, getting the 1 seed means that you win the MacNaughton Cup. So that's also pretty cool. Like to be able to win some hardware.
I'm leaving with something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like even if you don't come through in the Mason Cup playoffs, you can say, well, yeah, I think, you still don't want to get upset. If you win the MacNaughton Cup, you do not want to lose your first round series to at least Ferris State, at least get to the semifinals before you lose a 1 game. Anything can happen, but we'll touch on that if that happens. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I guess looking at seeding, obviously we just talked about who we'd rather play in the first round, but I think I just want to encourage fans, if there's any Bemidji fans in the I think they play in Houghton this weekend, so I guess maybe not too many of them, but go cheer for the Tommies because you want them to be as high of a seed as possible, especially if you win, because the chances that you play them if they're a 2 seed, which if both Bemidji State and St. Thomas sweep this weekend, St. Thomas is the 2 seed. That's perfect because then you guarantee yourself not to play them until the CCHA championship game, should they get there. Obviously, that's a long ways off, but Michigan Tech's pretty hot right now. We'll see what happens in that series in Houghton. A lot on the line for them still. They can get up to the 2 seed if everything goes their way. But yeah, again, just encouraging people to cheer for the Tommies this weekend because, hey, if we want to go to the NCAA tournament, you might have to win 1 less game if you end up pulling the Tommies.
Yeah, it's been such a weird season. And that's one reason, too, that winning the MacNaughton Cup, it would feel like such an accomplishment this year, just because there's only 1 team from this conference going to the tournament. They're going to be whoever wins the Mason Cup will be the 16th seed in the tournament, most likely. They're going to travel to Providence. They're going to play Boston College, all of that. It'll be a tough road for whoever ends up going there. The MacNaughton Cup would just be such a huge accomplishment for this team, just with where everything, with everything that happened, all the adversity that they faced early on in the season. It's definitely a week in CCHA, but it's still a conference championship. And that's just, it would just be so awesome to see that.
Yeah, exactly. And, with where this team was, even to December of this year. I know you guys have talked about some of the improvements, especially with the other lines, but a year ago at this time, we had you on, Lucas, and we were just kind of like, what happened? Like everything fell apart for them. They went into Mankato and they got the sweep and they got the points and it felt like everything just derailed from that point. And obviously health is the biggest thing that's come together. And Bemidji State, you can make the case, Lucas, that they really haven't been healthy and playing kind of the team that they want to be until right now. Do you see it that way? And do you kind of think that with all this getting healthy at the right time, that they're a team that you look at their regular season record and you kind of have to throw it out the window because they really haven't been able to be their full form in a sense?
To an extent, yeah. You still had those non-conference games early on in the season that you struggled in when you still had most of the guys in the lineup. That series against Duluth, looking back at that and how they got swept, that's it was a young team. They had a lot of guys playing new roles, and obviously they've improved a lot since then. And even right now, I would still say, missing Tony Fulmer is a pretty big deal for this team. He's a top four defenseman, probably a top two defenseman on your team, your best defensive defenseman, a guy that blocks a ton of shots, a guy that's your best penalty killer. Um, he went out in the Michigan Tech series back in January. We really haven't heard whether or not he'll be available the rest of the season. If you could get him back, I would feel a lot better about, just the decor as a whole. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, with these injuries early on in the season, because you did have those guys stepping into new roles, they were able to develop quicker. I mean, you had Reese Chittenden at times playing as a second line forward and getting those minutes early on in the year. You have these 5 sophomore defensemen that you kind of rotated through spots last year that have all played big minutes now and are all, well-seasoned players for you. So it's, obviously those injuries hurt your record early on in the season, but they gave guys a whole bunch of opportunities and playing time. And now they've developed into a really good hockey players, and you have just a ton of depth. And, that's kind of a mixed blessing with everything that was going on early in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that can't be overstated. Like, it's helpful too that the CCHA was as down as it was. If there was a team that would have kind of taken the reins earlier in the season, maybe those injuries start to plague you a little bit more and you start to lose a little bit of ground. But with the rest of the conference kind of slipping up, you were able to stay in the race, and now you're healthy again. And you've, taken points from 7 straight CCHA games. You've won 5 straight games. No, 4 straight games. A tie in the middle there, 6 straight games, technically winning in the conference if you count the shootout against Northern Michigan. So, it's been incredible to get those guys that ice time, because I think that'll benefit them not only for the rest of the season, but for the rest of their tenure with Bemidji State, hopefully. And I think that going into the playoffs, when now if you get an injury again, you are a little bit more confident in those guys that, you don't want it to happen, knock on wood, but you're a little bit more confident with the guys that you would have to throw into a second or third line role now.
Yeah, exactly. You got a couple of guys up in the press box that could easily slot into whatever position you need them to go to. And yeah, you have confidence in their abilities as well. A lot of them were playing decently well. It's just, especially those fourth line wingers, like you just, a couple other guys played better. And you're guys like Noah Quinn, Liam Engstrom, they could definitely still contribute for this team. There's just not a spot in the roster for them right now, or in the lineup for them right now.
Yeah, I think there will be going forward. Obviously, this is just kind of we'll see what happens next year with some of the fifth-year guys that are coming back, but there will be spots that open up on this roster for them. And I do think, especially like Engstrom, you saw really good flashes out of him earlier this year, and then I think he got hurt, right? And then he took a back seat kind of after the injury, and it's hard to take out, Chittenden and Lawson, and when they're playing so well on that line and they're gelling so well together, it's tough to shake it up now at the end of the season. And that's the only thing. Like, yeah, Fulmer coming back would be great, and I think that he is an exception to the rule. Like, you're willing to shake up those decor pairs.
Yep.
If a guy like Fulmer comes back, you're not just going to say, well, we're playing so well, we're not going to risk anything. Like, no, he's good enough to throw in there. But anything else about Minnesota State that you think the Beavers need to watch out for? Obviously, this we want to talk about this series a ton. I feel like we've hit on most of the main parts, but it's just a huge opportunity for the Beavers to become, they are the only team in the last 7 years that's won the MacNaughton Cup. And they have the opportunity to now get the second one before anybody else outside of the state of Minnesota has even sniffed it. So I think it's just a huge opportunity this weekend, and one that hopefully they don't let come to pass.
Yeah, you want to talk about like that mystic energy that seems like Minnesota State has, and just kind of that, that doubt in your mind every time you have to play them. Like that can change, and that can change with a series like this, where you go in there, you take it to them, you win the cup against them, And all of a sudden that narrative is gone, and things, things could switch going forward, and all of a sudden maybe you're their kryptonite. So why not? Why not start it this weekend?
Why not us? Why not now? Right. I mean, that's pretty much it with this team. And you talked about, like, they're like a mystic energy. Once you get into, and that's kind of what I hope for this weekend. And we talked earlier about the vibes of the Sanford Center. I hope that people just know, like, this is, like we talked about, this is something that hasn't happened in 7 years now, where they got to finish the season with the MacNaughton Cup in your rink. And like we talked about, for the opportunity to do it on your own home ice, to do it against a rival. I mean, it's just a perfect storm of what you would want this last series of the season to be. And I think it's got the makings to be some really fun. I think people will get up for this one. I think it will be a really good atmosphere, because I think people in this town know, hey, it's been 7 years since we had the MacNaughton Cup last, chance to do it again. And despite Minnesota State while doing it, I think it's just a perfect storm to end up having a really good Sanford Center this weekend.
Yeah, I think at the very least, even if it's not sold out, it's going to be one of the best in-conference crowds we've seen at the Sanford Center all season long. It should be a really good atmosphere. And, I mean, this is just as big a weekend for Minnesota State, obviously. I mean, yeah, they've won 6 straight MacNaughton Cups. They've had a lot more postseason success, but this is the first year under head coach Luke Strand, and it's kind of a transition period. And honestly, if they would have had a little bit worse of a season and actually kind of been down around 6th where they were picked to finish, you never know how that affects your recruiting trail. Yeah, they've got a good history there in Minnesota or in Mankato, but the legendary coach leaves, and all of a sudden there's new blood in there. And if they sputter the wheels in year one, maybe all those recruits start to question whether or not, especially in today's age where people just up and leave as quickly as they can. This is a big game for them. And obviously, if they lose this series, they are probably still going to finish in the top 4. So it's not like they're in huge jeopardy of dropping into the 6th spot. But I still think that there's plenty on the line for them.
Squash out their optimism. That's basically it.
It's close. I mean, they need these points too. I mean, they only have a 3-point lead over 5th place. So, I mean, it could flip if you go in there and sweep them, and you get a Tech and St. Thomas split, and Bowling Green gets 4 points. All of a sudden, it's Mankato having to make that long road trip out to Ohio. So,
right. The one benefit for them would be the fact that Michigan Tech and St. Thomas have to share points this weekend. And if Bemidji wins on Friday, there's a good chance you see Gavin Enright on senior night. They've already given him the business down in Mankato. Him and Rathan Robbins had a tough weekend there, regardless of the crazy comebacks. So, they could still at least pick up a couple points and maybe leapfrog back up for 4th. But yeah, you're right. They're still in danger if they don't pick up something this weekend of having to go on the road.
Yeah, and senior night will be something to watch too. I always like going to senior night games. It's kind of cool to see just those players get recognized, especially when you have guys like Kyle Loft and Carter Jones, those guys that come back for their 5th year and try, they come back for this opportunity to win a CCHA championship. You can't speak high enough about what Kyle's done for this program and just how great of a guy it seems like he is. So, it'll be awesome to see that. It's always kind of interesting to see if there's any unexpected participants or unexpected absences from senior night. You can always get a couple of hints about, players coming back or leaving early when that happens. So, just something else to watch for on Saturday night, especially.
Yeah, I mean, this weekend, there's a whole, like we've talked about, there's the possibility that it's senior night and we're looking at things kind of for the playoffs and everything on Saturday night, or it's Saturday night's kind of a weird vibe. I mean, I think it's Friday has a chance to really be kind of the thing. I mean, obviously, it'll set the tone for what Saturday is going to be, but Bemidji State has a real opportunity to just kind of grab it, pun intended, by the horns on Friday and just end it and not allow Mankato to get any momentum, not allow them to feel like, hey, we took points from last night. All we got to do is do it again. All of a sudden, they're the ones who need to press. I mean, Friday is definitely going to be obviously the bigger one of the two, but I mean, it's obvious, but it's a really big game Friday night.
I think it depends on how Friday night goes, because if Friday night goes 3 points for Mankato, Saturday night will be much bigger. Like The tension
It'll
in
feel
that
much more
building from
tense.
Beaver
Yeah.
fans, yeah, that will be palpable like crazy. So, yeah, I'm just, as much as I would like to go to 2 super exciting games, I'd rather go to 1 and then just have 1 super relaxing game, like, "Oh, cool, we're watching hockey," that for, the better or worse doesn't mean anything, but and I think that would be cool. And I don't know why. I know that they would do the ceremony after the game on Friday, but you brought up the fact that the last time they won it, they were in Huntsville, and we got to watch it. I watched it on my phone. I think I was at a bar uh, at that time, and I was really excited because I thought that they might do something the next weekend because they came home to play Mankato, and they never did. I think it was on display, but I don't think they ever did anything on the ice. So it is very cool that it will be in your building, and I think that that sucks to be able to squander away that opportunity. So hopefully that they can come out, and I think that they will. Like you said, hearing from Kyle Loft a couple weeks ago, I think it was Jack Hittinger's article on him in USCHO. Just like he understands, and this is why he came back, exactly like you said, and Carter Jones as well. Like they want to capitalize on those opportunities. I think Kyle Loft said that he's been in a situation like this, 3 other times, and they failed to capitalize in all 3 times. So, like you said, they know what's at stake, and I think that they're going to get up for this game.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. They've been playing with such good intensity these last 3 weekends specifically. Every single game's felt like a playoff game already. I just don't see them stopping that. This weekend, that first shift on Friday night, it's going to be huge. Whoever can set that tone early, whoever can get that first goal, it's going to go a long ways towards the MacNaughton Cup.
So we got about 10 more minutes here. Ian, I know that there's a couple things on your list. Maybe you just want to cross off before we finish things up. Is there anything else you want to get Lucas's thoughts on?
Well, I asked him about the fourth line. Lucas, maybe you care to comment really quickly on Eric Polkamp and his improvement since the World Junior Tournament. I think that, at least in my opinion, I've seen a more confident player on the puck. I don't feel as nervous, especially in the defensive zone, when he has to make a quick decision on where to go with the puck. I think that tournament maybe was a turning point for him, at least in his freshman season. Have you seen anything like that since that tournament from him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously early on in the season, you could see that he was talented and he had those flashes of brilliance throughout, showing some great skating ability, had some really good moments offensively. He had goals that first weekend of his career. But there were some defensive lapses and just some little miscues here and there where you could kind of tell he wasn't quite up to speed yet. At 26 games into the season now, it's hard to call yourself a freshman anymore. When you've played the number of minutes, I mean, he's playing 25 minutes a game too now. I mean, that's another big thing. Like he's got plenty of playing time. He's no longer really a freshman. He's up to speed with the level of competition. Obviously he played at a high level in the USHL too before the season. But going to the World Juniors too, when you play against some of that elite talent in your age group, and get kind of a different, just different pace to the game, you're going to improve. And yeah, for sure, he's definitely been a much better player here the second half of the season. And if it wasn't for Kyle Loft, I think he'd be in the conversation for CCHA Defenseman of the Year in addition to Rookie of the Year. He's just having that type of year right now.
Yeah. CJ, unless you have anything else to add about Minnesota State or the state of the CCHA, I do have one a little bit more off topic, but still related to college hockey question for Lucas here to kind of send us out.
Yeah, go for it.
So anybody that's kind of plugged into college hockey might have seen what happened up in Alaska this weekend with Alaska Fairbanks and Arizona State. And there's been a lot of talk, especially on Twitter, of allowing fighting in college hockey. I know it's been allowed at every other stage. It's allowed in juniors. It's allowed in the pros. I want to know where you stand on that, Lucas. What's your opinion on allowing fighting in college hockey?
I would say I'm against it. Like I get why people like it. It's exciting. It's fun to see in certain situations. at those higher levels, it allows you to kind of police the game a bit more on your own without needing officials and things like that. But, it's never going to happen in college hockey. The NCAA is just not going to allow it. And I think it's starting to you're starting to even see that trend in other leagues as well. I mean, you've got the QMJHL now, which is outlawed fighting. Major junior leagues throughout Canada are looking at it too. With the NCAA specifically, they're never going to allow it. They're never going to take on that liability of players getting injured in fights. That's why they're not going to allow anything other than full shields either. Like they don't want that,
Right.
that risk of liability or needing to provide insurance for student athletes, things like that. Like it's just never going to happen at this game. I understand why certain people like it. It's not for me though. Like if you want fighting, go watch the Fed. Like I like seeing higher skilled hockey than what some of those leagues provide.
Right. And I think that that's pretty much my exact opinion on it. Like fights are fun and all. But I think that I'm perfectly fine with the way that college hockey is right now. It wouldn't necessarily improve my quality of enjoyment for the game. And I think that there is certain fans that would maybe you get a couple more fans to come to games. I don't think it would drastically improve attendance across the board, but it make it a little bit more exciting for people, I guess, to go and hope for something that they wanted to see. But yeah, I think you just open up the door to more, suspensions from players, because I'm sure even if it was allowed, you'd still be able to pick up some suspensions, and it leads to 5-minute, fighting penalties, and then you don't have one of your players on the ice that is a important part of your team. I agree with you. I just wanted to bring it up because I know it was all over the news this last week. So and then the only other thing I have to bring up is CJ misspelling MacNaughton Cup on one of our most important. I noticed that about halfway through, but I didn't want to.
There's no spell check on the graphic service, so you know what? It's there.
You've thrown this so hard, dude. We're not winning the cup now.
It's there. Well, you see, if they lose, then we'll still win this cup. We'll get that cup. This is why there's no spell check on the graphic thing. And as I've talked about in like private chats, I am the world's worst proofreader. Which is bad considering that I do some writing for other things. So like anytime like they'll look at it and they'll be like, were you planning to finish this sentence here? And I was like, yes, I was very much looking to finish this sentence that I just left kind of halfway out there. So anyway, So for those of you who are hearing this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, you can go to the YouTube page or you can go to Facebook or X and you can see right there. You can see my grammatical inconsistencies on that. One last thing before we wrap up the podcast. What's your prediction? Does Bemidji State bring home the MacNaughton Cup, and how does it happen? I think they get a 4-3 overtime win on Friday. I think that'll do it for me.
That'd be a hell of an exciting way to have it happen. Would be an overtime.
If you're going to do it big.
Right. I think that they'll get it done. I'm not sure how. I think that this team is playing too well right now. I mean, maybe there's a situation where they lose on Friday because Minnesota State's still pretty good, and then the pressure is too much for them. But I don't see it happening. I think that they'll pick up enough points this weekend to clinch. At the very least, I think that they can get 1 point and at least share the title. So, yeah, I think they'll bring it home.
Yeah, I think they get it done Friday. I think the final score will be something like 5-2, which will look more convincing than it actually was, because I think there'll be 2 empty netters in there. So I'm going to go 5-2, 2 empty netters late.
All right. Yeah. I love it. It
might remind you a little bit of Michigan Colgate in the first round last season. Maybe an 11-0 scoreline for the Beavers. Leighton Road with a double hat trick to get his 20th goal of the season. Yeah. Let's be optimistic here.
I think Bemidji State will be winning by so much that they don't even play Saturday. They just say, we're going back to Mankato. It's not worth it. We forfeit the points. We can't go with this public embarrassment yet again.
It's so demeaning. Yeah.
Anyway, so I think one more thing before we finish up. I think we need to finish up this podcast by giving the old horns down, just to make sure we make our point. Lucas, you gonna hop in on this one? Yeah. There
Let's go.
Let's go.
Everybody at home, throw up a horns down.
Horns down. Horns down. Beavs up. Let's go. All right. This has been the Beaver Banter Podcast. We'll be back next week with all the action, recapping everything. So be sure to follow us, give us those reviews, do all the good stuff.